welcome to Break the Boardroom, a music business podcast breaking the wall between the public and music industry insiders. I'm your host, Ashley Betances, a music business student studying commercial music industries at Rider University. We have our audio engineer and producer, Curtis Sullivan, in the room who will also be asking some questions. So before we start, please like this episode and subscribe to our show and social media pages linked in the description, and consider donating to our coffee page. Every donation counts and helps us bring you the best content possible. Thank you, and let's get started. So our guest today is Jamie Dominguez. She has 25 years of experience in the music industry, is an instructor at Berkeley NYC, and has previously worked at CSAC as the Senior Director of Creative Services. She currently works at Sound Royalties as the Regional Director of Business Development and Artist Relations, among other roles in different organizations. Please welcome Jamie Dominguez.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Can you introduce yourself and your experience and many different roles in the music industry?
Sure, I'll try my best to encapsulate it into an introduction, but you did a beautiful job already. My name is Jamie Dominguez, and like you said, I've been in the industry for 25 years. It's crazy that I've been, involved that long, but it's my passion, and I love it. And I have, like you said, I've sort of I stayed in one company for a long time, CSAC, but before moving on to Sound Royalties, and in that time, I've sort of been able to grow and experiment after I left CSAC, and found a sort of niche for myself, which we'll get into later. But overall, I would just describe myself as a creative Sherpa, a guide. I really enjoy connecting dots and educating our community, the creatives, both the creatives and young professionals wanting to, sort of get involved in the industry. And I really see my role as someone who is there to shepherd in this next generation and to really improve the, I guess, shortcomings of our industry, the things that have been a source of struggle for a lot of artists, but also how do we make the business equitable and fair, sustainable, profitable for everybody involved on the creative side and on the business side. And I think it's possible, and we just have to work together as a community to make that happen. So really what I do, I think, is connect dots and really try to find ways, new, interesting business developments, and to share with creatives, and sort of bridge the gap between the two worlds as well, between the business and the creative, to make sure that everyone is sort of speaking the same language and understanding there's transparency. I kind of digress there, but
No, that's perfect. So I do want to touch upon that education and the aspect of really teaching the new and aspiring, I guess, industry professionals, and guiding them. What are some ways that you do that in your career and in other aspects as well?
I always did it just, when I was at CSAC, my primary role there was it was sort of a threefold role, where I was acquiring new talent, new songwriters. I was doing sort of the A&R aspect of the job. And then also maintaining our current roster, the current roster of artists at CSAC. So just making sure that, the writers any questions they might have about their royalty statements, or they just want advice on a situation. And then, the third part of the job was really branding CSAC, sort of bringing awareness about CSAC and educating the community about what CSAC does. So there was always an educational component to what I did. Anytime I had a meeting with a songwriter or anybody on their team, whether it's a manager or an attorney or a business manager, anyone involved, really, there was always an education aspect to it because we would just sit in my office or wherever we were and talk about all kinds of things, but really, you know, what that part of the business is, it's very, what's the word? It's a very niche sort of part of the business.
Mhm.
A lot of professionals within the industry don't really have a full understanding of it, of how royalty income works, how it flows, because it is extremely complicated. There are a lot of cooks in the kitchen, which makes it complicated. The
Yeah.
nature of deals, they're all structured differently. So it becomes a really tricky part of the business, and quite frankly, it's one of the most important because this is sort of your lifeline as an artist, and everybody around it. That's why publishing and anything surrounding that is so lucrative. That's really how you make money in your sleep, and how
Yeah.
you make a living, how your grandchildren can benefit from your art down the
Mhm.
line. It can create generational wealth if you do it right. So it's so important, and I'm really grateful that that was really my main entry point. My first real job in the industry. There was one other before that. I worked for a public relations firm in Austin, Texas, when I was still in college,
Mhm.
and it was an entertainment PR firm, and that really gave me a lot of skills that I use still, just in terms of how you communicate with people. But
Mhm.
yeah, there's always been that educational element to what I do, and I really enjoy it. I love just talking with artists and anyone on their team about what's going on, what their experiences are, and what they're learning, and what their hardships are, so and how I can help add value or connect them with someone who can you know enhance their situation, or
Mhm.
bring something to the table that they might need. So yeah, it's always been there. And then when I transitioned into the Sound Royalties gig, for me that was really about, I needed to try something new for my own personal growth. And
Yes.
it's always important, to grow and to learn continuously, continuously educating
Mhm.
yourself.
Oh yeah.
But especially because it's such a priority in my career to really have a legacy, to leave something behind.
Mhm.
And so that's sort of what made me pivot into this sort of music and finance space that I found myself in, which I never would have thought I would ever be here, but I am. And that's a whole nother journey and adventure that I'm really enjoying and trying to make the most of now.
So when we talk about all of these music publishing contracts, music publishing deals, that we usually call them that, what are some things that you tell people who you're talking to, who you're sitting down in that office and they're talking to you about all of these things, and what are some of the things that you tell them?
That's a great question. I always tell them to talk to everybody they know, whether it's their peers, other artists, if they're going into a situation with a label or a publisher or any company, find out, do your research, find other artists who've had dealings with whatever the entity is, and ask them questions. Ask them about their experience. Really doing your research and educating yourself before you go into a situation is so important, because when you sign a contract, when you sign yourself to a deal,
Mm.
that's it. You're locked in.
Yeah.
It's like a marriage, and it's so important to know what you're getting into beforehand. So yeah, ask everybody in that space, any question you want. There are no silly questions. You have the right to ask any question you want. Another
Mm.
thing I always tell people is, if you're in a negotiation with a company, whether it's a label or a publisher or manager, whoever it is, everything is negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone who tells you that whatever is on paper or whatever they say is industry standard, I consider that a big red flag. Because yes, there are sort of the systematic ways that the industry has done things historically, but that doesn't mean it's not a law. You know what I mean? Only there's copyright law infringement and legalities, yes, but in terms of the types of deal structures, and there is really no standard. So I think if there's ever a point where that is relayed to you, that this is just how it is, that's just not true. You always have the right as an artist or anyone going into a contract to negotiate and to ask questions and to voice any concerns. So always, yeah, make sure that you don't just sign something because someone tells you that's the way it is.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah.
Can I ask also?
Mhm.
I've noticed just from my dealings in the industry and everything, I've noticed that sometimes there are people who will tell you that, oh, you're on a corporate gig or whatever, so we don't do this or that. Can you just speak to like when you do have brands who are wanting to collaborate with artists or do different things, that should probably go very similarly to doing an event or like a concert, like it shouldn't like cut your pay in half or something because they're like, oh well, this is just a small thing.
Yeah, that it's tough because of course there's always budget constraints and everyone's trying to
Yeah.
make things work and everybody has expectations and things that they feel they're entitled to. I think it's really just a matter of being transparent and communicating and just meeting in the middle. Both sides really have to understand the nature of the situation and listen to the other person and really try to understand because of course I was just having this conversation with a manager yesterday about an artist who wanted X amount of money for an advance, but what the artist, I don't think, and it was a young artist, I don't think the artist realized in asking for the amount that they wanted was that this isn't free money
Mm,
and you have to recoup that money,
yes.
and it doesn't make sense in for where you're at the moment to take that much money. It really wouldn't be in the artist's best interest or on the label's best interest to extend that much money. Both sides, it just wouldn't make sense, right? And so I think there's a real responsibility for on both parts to listen and to talk to each other, to communicate. The label really has to do the best to um, articulate why, and explain and really be transparent about the situation. And then the artist also has the onus is on them to really pay attention to that and try to understand and to reframe how they sort of see things. But yeah, I think like any relationship, both sides really just there's a transparency that I think if you strip it all down fundamentally, that's sort of where all the issues arise in our business. I think is a lack of transparency, right? Like just everybody just lay it on the table, shoot it straight.
Yeah.
Like let's just be direct,
Yeah.
you know, and then everything's gonna be perfect. No, I'm just kidding, but you know what I'm saying. Like it's not. I sometimes I can romanticize it, but no, of course, nothing's ever going to be perfect because you're dealing with all kinds of personalities, and the nature of what we do in this business is so full of colorful situations and
Yeah.
personalities and people and everybody is passionate and everybody wants to do cool things and everybody wants to make money. People want to be famous. There's so many things that it's a very unique space that we're in. So that it can be challenging, but yeah, I think it's just a communication and transparency really on both sides.
Yes. In that similar vein, one of the things that I actually learned was that when two musicians or more are in a room, they should probably write sort of like a little contract saying like who wrote what and what is their cut. You know, how do you recommend artists go about that? Because I know there's so many people who collaborate, but they probably
Yeah.
don't understand that they should really be making sure that their splits are correct and that everything is
Yeah.
sort
I
of.
mean, that is always an awkward situation for a lot of artists because they don't feel comfortable talking about money or business, or they just want to focus on creating and making the art. But yeah, it is, as a creator, you are, and I used to drill this into my Berkeley students in class all the time, like as a creator, you are the CEO of your own business. You have to treat it like that. So there's always an approach. It's all about the approach, and I think you just get it out of the way, and you can make it as light as you need to. It doesn't have to be this dark, heavy conversation. It could be like, all right, let's have a drink, let's have a coffee, whatever. Let's get a slice of pizza. I don't know. Let's just get this out of the way. Let's figure out how we're gonna sort this situation. What are the splits gonna be? Because if you don't figure it out, you're gonna have problems in the long term, and dealing with that is much more problematic. It's gonna cost you a lot of money to backpedal and fix those problems. So get it out of the way so that you can start making the money sooner, make more money in the process, and avoid the conflict. Which avoiding that conversation in the beginning could actually end up turning into a conflict later down the road, right? So yeah, if you just deal with things and don't avoid it, then yeah, you'll avoid a lot of headache. So.
Yes. Is that a role that should I reword it as, is there a role that sort of takes care of all of those aspects of an artist?
Yeah, I mean, you could have a manager or an attorney do it on your behalf. Um, at that point, you're probably further down the road in your career, have more leverage. But I think also sometimes it can be beneficial to just do it directly as peers. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, if you're depending on the situation, of course, but I think it could be a positive thing if it comes from the artist to artist.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's just talk about it. Of course, yeah, there are certain situations where it's not a close relationship. Maybe they're collaborating for a
Mm-hmm.
specific project, and there's not even really any interaction. That happens all the time now, right? Virtually or otherwise. So yeah, then yeah, you can have your attorneys connect and hammer it out, or management team can do it
Mm-hmm.
as well.
So in that general aspect of the roles that there are in the industry to help
Mhm.
artists, can you tell me a little bit about those roles, and let's get to that second part of the question
Okay.
a little later when you
Yeah.
yeah. So just tell me like a little bit about those roles that there are in the
I mean,
industry.
there are so many. There are so many, but I guess if we just strip it down to the basics, let's
Mhm.
just keep it real simple.
Yeah.
I think if you can think of it like, okay, you have the creative, you have the creator, and then you
Mhm.
have, it sort of branches out into two sides of who the creator deals with. Their team of their business team, right? The people they hire,
Mhm.
the individuals they hire directly to support and oversee all of their business. So, management team,
Mhm.
their business manager, accountant, their attorney, um, agent, their booking agent, publicist. Those are a few
Mhm.
examples, like the core examples. I would say the traditional examples of the team, the artist team. And then on the other side, you have, I would say, let's call them like third party entities
Mhm.
who are then brought on to partner with the artist. We're talking about a record label, a publisher, promoter, distributor, to then take what the team has built, what the artist has created, and what the team has built, and take that body of work, whatever it is, and exploit it, promote it, disseminate it to the public, market it, turn it into maybe other forms of business, other business verticals, whether it's licensing it out or creating something else through their music platform. There's so many. So I would kind of strip it down to those roles. But really, in this day and age, you can sort of carve out your own role. You can find your niche, because artists always need very specific things, and there are people who are experts in that specific thing, and maybe that's what the artist wants to focus on. And whether it's like, I had a meeting yesterday with a woman who consults for a lot of labels and artists or their management teams to do playlist pitching. And that's something that's a lane she created for herself, because she was already doing it within a label structure, and then figured there was such a demand for it, and then just branched out and started doing it on her own. But there's so many people like that, people who do sync licensing, or there's so many examples of people who've created this niche for themselves. And so the beauty of the music business, and also, I guess, why it can also be the Wild West, is that there's no barrier to entry, unless you're an attorney or you're an accountant and you need a specific degree to practice. You could enter the music industry tomorrow if you want. I could say, I'm going to manage you. I'm gonna be your publicist. So you really have a lot of freedom within the space if you figure out what your expertise is. You know what I mean? And you build your network, and you know how to market yourself, and you know how to talk to people. You can really create whatever you want.
So in that vein, you mentioned marketing, and I think that's one of the biggest things nowadays, because there's so much social media and there's all these platforms that artists can sort of just throw their image out there and you know either get really popular, or people don't even notice them. There's just so much competition nowadays. When should a musician or even a music industry professional, like, when should they look for one of these people, like an attorney or someone to market them, or anyone in these roles?
Yeah, that's always a tricky question, or not question, but a tricky situation, because I think until you really have something to manage, then there's no reason to hire somebody, unless there's really something happening, or a project is it's ready. It's things are happening. You already have people reaching out to you. There's been some activity. There's been engagement. It's to a point where, okay, I need to bring somebody on to help support me in this and to help build it further. The timing is really crucial. I think if you approach it too early, then you're just wasting resources and time. But also, if you really want to engage the right people, it's always about timing. And usually nowadays, managers, attorneys, whoever they are, find the artists that they want to work with, right? Now, it's such a chicken before the egg scenario, because it's like, but then how do I get to this level if I don't have any help and I need somebody to help it?
Yeah.
But the reality is, no one's going to make miracles happen. Just because you hire a manager doesn't mean that your life is going to change. You really already have to have to me, I mean, this is just my observation. I mean, of course, there are amazing teams out there who have created incredible careers for people.
Mhm.
But I think in the best case scenario, it's sort of a true partnership
Mm.
of the art, both the creative, the artist, whoever they are, and their management team as partners, right? Like really being open and transparent and having a like-minded vision, but also really listening to each other.
Mm.
It's not just like, okay, the artist wants to be famous, let's make it happen. You know,
Yeah.
what are you working with? Like, it just doesn't
Mhm.
come out of thin air.
Yeah.
And if it does, that's pretty lucky, I would say. And also the stars aligning perfectly, and you know, maybe just the right amount of money. I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, I find that like longevity in a career and a really just successful artist who will be around for generations, they have a lot of them have had longtime managers or lifetime managers, really,
Mhm.
or teams, and and they have a very symbiotic relationship. You know, it's not, as an artist, you definitely can't just like have someone run your business and not have any
Mm.
engagement or interest or knowledge of what's going on. That you're really going to crash and burn, because then you're leaving everything into someone else's hands, and you really don't know what's going on. So,
Mm.
yeah, as an artist, super important to be involved. Of course, you should be able to hand things off and be trusting that things are happening, but there should always be a communication. There should always be, before decisions are made, everything needs to go, you know, everyone needs to communicate and talk about it first.
Mm.
And on the business side, same thing. I think there's an onus on the business side to really make sure the artist is educated and understands the nature of whatever contract they're entering into, or whatever deal they're entering into with a label, or what that relationship means.
Mm.
What is in their responsibilities to deliver as the artist to the label. You know, they're funding your project. Like, you have to deliver things,
Yes.
but also remain an artist and be true to that. So the business side also has to understand that you have to let the artist be an artist, be authentic, and you can't put too much pressure, and you have to let them rest when they need to rest. Like, they're not machines. You know, so there's just things on both sides that you if you want to have a manager, if you want to have a team, a superstar team, yes, it's important. It can definitely make your career happen or explode, but
Mm.
also understand as an artist that it won't be a miraculous life-changing thing just on its own. Everybody has to
Yeah.
do the work. You know, both sides have
Mm.
to do their work.
So, how about for, we always talk about the artist this, the artist that. But what about for people who are aspiring to be in the industry as on the business side? So, do they have to make it on their own? Can they have a team too?
I mean, I feel like my team is really all of the relationships that I've nurtured and built over the years. Who
Mm.
at this point, you know, I've known these people for 20 plus years, a lot of them. So at this point, I've known them half my life, and they're my friends. You know, this is like my work family, and
Mm-hmm.
you learn along the way that that's how the industry works. You support each other. You send
Mm.
each other clients, you refer business to each other. It really is a community. It's an ecosystem that you create, and you can create your own ecosystem. So I definitely have my inner circle, but I know you sort of sense out intuitively, who you can work with, right? And you develop that relationship, and you may not work together ever, but there's always that, 1 degree of separation or 2 degrees of separation, like, oh, I know so and so, you should meet them because you could help them out, or you could they're looking for a manager, they're looking for an attorney, and so it's always important to develop those relationships and to never take them for granted, because you never know. It's all about supporting each other. That's that's what drives the business, is really these relationships. It's one of the, the entertainment industry in general. I think the creative industry in general is really about relationships. It's not transactional. There's a lot of trust involved, and building that trust is so important. So even if, people always want to be vetted, they always want, before someone does the deal with someone, they always ask, they ask around, like, do you know so and so? Should I trust them? Are they cool? What's the vibe? So yeah. What was the question again?
I was just asking, like, can business professionals also
Yes.
have a team?
Yeah. So that's my answer is yes. Your team is all these relationships you build. And of course, like, if you're at a company, that's your team. That's your internal immediate team. But I think that also all these other people in the industry that your contacts, your network, that is also your team. It becomes your team, not, maybe not directly. You don't work for the same company, but you still work together. Everybody sort of interacts in some capacity, right? Everybody's interfacing in any given moment. There's a lot of collaboration that happens in our industry. So it's really important to sort of build your network, and that becomes your team.
So, for those who are just starting, they don't have a career yet, they don't have a job in the field yet. They're probably still going to school, even. So, in a sense, would their team be their peers, right?
Absolutely.
Their professors, the people they come
Absolutely,
across.
yeah. It's like, you really just, the more people um it's very educational too. It's really, it adds value, just even if you never speak to somebody again, but you come across them, and just the interaction can kind of inform you, like, okay, this is was an interesting conversation, or I really didn't like talking to that person, and getting to the bottom of why that was, or something didn't rub you right, like, every interaction you learn something, and every relationship you learn something, whether it's negative, positive, you know nothing, like, you do take away something from that interaction, even if it's like, okay, well, I know I never have to talk to that person again, or I don't like their vibe, or whatever it is.
I know, like, I'm part of Grammy U, and there's so many people, and I, honestly speaking, they're part of our audience as well, people who are in these communities who are really, they're trying to get to know each other, but I see that a lot of people don't really communicate with each other, even if they're in the same general bubble, So we have, like, our chapter for New York, and, I haven't really spoken to
Right.
anyone, but all these other people from different chapters are talking to me. So it's sort of like, how do we get that connection started? How are we breaking down that wall? And I think that goes in line with even the topic of our podcast, breaking that wall so that we can get to where we need to get and really make those connections and start advancing in our
Right.
careers.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think there's always there always needs to be a reason, whether, if you're trying to connect with someone, maybe you've met, at a networking event, a Grammy U networking event, and you're like, okay, I really like your vibe, and we have a lot to talk about. Don't really know what that means, but maybe we can sit and brainstorm potential ways we could collaborate or work together. I think if you sort of frame it very specifically, because everyone's busy, everyone, life is consuming, and you meet a lot of people in this business along the way, and sometimes, they're not the top of your mind. Um, especially the longer you go in this industry, the more the bandwidth for your memory becomes narrower and narrower. And it takes a moment for you totally forget, like, oh, wait, yeah. What about that person? They could be really, they could really add a lot of value to what I'm doing right now. I should pick their brain. So I think when you meet people in that scenario where you're just getting to know each other, you don't really have a specific purpose to engage, kind of create some reason to connect, whether it's just to brainstorm, or, oh, I have someone who I want to introduce you to. Um, you guys might be able to work on something together. Because that dot connecting thing,
Yeah.
people always remember that. They always remember that. And I always used to say, like when I was starting out, and I was at CSAC still, and I would always, anytime I was out, and luckily I had an expense account so I could do this. But anytime I was at a show and was meeting people, back then, I was at gigs almost every single night of the week, right? So, and that was where business was done. It's a little bit different now. It's not as much of that. There's more and more being done virtually, but um, yeah, I would always make sure to buy someone a drink, buy someone coffee, you know, whatever the case was, because they remember that, you
Yeah.
know. So that was always one of my scenarios, my tactics of strategies of how to kind of engage someone. You buy them a drink, you buy them coffee, you buy them lunch, whatever it is. Then yeah, they're gonna sit and talk to you, and they're gonna remember that. They remember, oh, she bought me a drink. That was really nice, and we had a nice chat. Even if it was 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it was.
Yeah, and to that point, like I've noticed a lot of like actually I made a commitment to be a full-time engineer just I was kind of a year in when COVID hit. And then so I'm like figuring it out as we're going and I go back to working regular jobs and whatever. And a friend of mine ends up seeing me and I end up working at this corporate place, but I walk in and like I'm like, yeah, whatever, this corporate place, I meet the guy. Eventually my new boss like mixed Aretha Franklin, he mixed Cool in the Gang, like he was on tour. And then I, get to the room and it's like, oh, that guy's a music engineer, 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 that guy's on tour half the year, that guy like, and it becomes this thing of if you're just like, oh, that guy manages this person or that guy, is friends with this person. Because that would happen where like, some of, a certain very popular group lived about 20 minutes from me and you would hear people go like, oh, let's go to that party. It's at their house.
Mm-hmm.
And I inherently was like, nah, because I feel like a lot of people there are just gonna be like, oh my god, this is the house.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
bet they were smoking weed down there. I bet they were, like and over time I ended up going and doing gigs where I was like, oh god, I don't want to do this. I'm not going to know anybody. No one's going to know what I'm talking about. A lot of times, those are the connections that, like, 2 weeks later, you're like, oh my God, I'm so glad I went. And
Yeah.
this person knows this person and, connects those dots.
Yeah.
But you don't know if you're not, it's a very social industry. So you have to put it out there.
Totally. It's always beneficial to get outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Always. Because you don't want to work in a vacuum. You don't want to
No.
it becomes really to keep activity breeds activity, however motion creates motion, like you got to keep it moving forward. And
Yeah.
and when you get, especially creatively, and I consider the business side, to be clear, like I consider that creative as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We are in a creative industry, and it's just, there's two sides of it, if you want to break it down in a very black and white case. But But yeah, we're all creative minded, and in order to stay creative and inspired, I think it's really important to constantly challenge yourself and learn and push your limits and put yourself in situations that might not be so comfortable, you
Yeah.
know? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
to be honest, I don't like public speaking. That was people might think I do because I do so many panels and I taught and whatever, but like no, I don't. Is it comfortable? No. I get a little nervous every time. I'm more comfortable now because I sort of figured out, okay, this is sort of the message I overall that I want to convey, right? I have like a purpose and a message now that I know is part of my narrative. But how each situation is different, and it's always a little jarring because you don't want to sound like an idiot, and you're like, oh my god, there's very seasoned executives in this room and they're listening to every word I say, and it can be really intimidating, but I force myself to do it because it's important, and it really has helped my career, and put me in front of people and developed new relationships with those people, and I probably wouldn't have been able to accomplish that if I hadn't taken the leap and did the panel or taught
Yeah.
the class or whatever the case was. Definitely it's always, I would say, you gotta make yourself a little uncomfortable and challenge yourself always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the same thing in the classroom as well. A lot of people are still even in school or they just graduated from school. So even like just raising your hand and asking a question, I think that's even putting yourself out there to really understand. Like, if I want to learn about this topic, I have to talk about the topic. You know,
Absolutely.
um, so yeah, that's one of the things that I learned in school too. And sometimes I even had like conversations back and forth, even sometimes a little bit argumentative, like, no, this is not this way, or yes, and then the other person's like, yes, this is this way. But then it's like you take your step back and you realize, oh, there's so many different perspectives that if you don't speak up or you don't talk to anyone, you don't indulge yourself
Yeah, no, definitely. And you learn, you know, understanding all the perspectives or listening to everyone's
in.
perspectives is education.
Mm-hmm.
Really,
Definitely.
it's like really understanding people and what drives them, and that really informs how you communicate with them. It really determines sort of the nature of what your relationship is, and you know how to approach if there's something on the business front that you want to talk to them about, you know how to approach it. It's really, you got to pay attention to people. Like, this is really about, you know, again, if you want to break it down really to a really rudimentary level, like it's all about building relationships and as humans paying attention to
Mhm.
each other and really listening and catching that other person's vibe and how to interact with it.
Definitely. So in that general area, I do want to ask about like public relations versus artist relations. Because I think people don't really realize that there's two different aspects to the whole, I guess, managing the artist's
I mean,
image.
that talk about an art. That is an art. Like that's a very specific thing that not a lot of people can do.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, if you're talking about public relations, um, as a broad concept, it's really what that is I guess, um, a, 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 as an individual or a group, an entity, there's a specific message you
Mhm.
want to relay to the public, to sort of influence their perception. That's what public relations is, in essence. Um, so it's really, yeah, creating sort of a narrative, um, and hopefully the public perception is what you aim for it to be. Now, I guess if you're talking about artist relations, I mean, that's really just I mean, on my end of things, where I'm at now at Sound Royalties, what that means for me is really just being in the community, educating them, really making sure that they understand the nuances of what we do,
Mm.
but also in general, like just educating them on various business things, business ideas that are so important, on the finance side of things, on the royalty income, and all of the things that have sort of presented themselves in our industry recently that to artists are really outside of their wheelhouse in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. I mean, most traditionally, most artists don't really want to have to deal with the finances, but it's become such a part of the conversation now that they need to at least understand on a high level, like what their options are and what that means for them as an individual, as an artist, how it impacts them, what they can do to elevate their whatever their financial situation is, or bring in more revenue. There's these are the things that, like, as when I talk about, when I say artist relations, or industry relations, I think that's what that really is. It's sort of um, educating them and relaying information so that they can have an understanding of what's happening in our industry, and what there's always new developments, all constantly, technology, creatively, on the business side, all of the players that keep entering the space, whether they're tech companies or private equity firms. There's so many people that want a piece of this. And so that's why I think that, having someone who, or a team that really focuses on making sure that the artist community, the creative community understands, and there's, that's really, I think, what the artist relations, industry relations term is to me, and what I do.
Yeah. So my understanding is that you also did PR before, right?
I did. That was like my first job. I interned at a PR firm, an entertainment PR firm in Austin, Texas, when I was going to UT, and then when I graduated, I was still working for them. A little bit after I graduated, and then I landed my job at CSAC and moved to New York as an assistant, and then just grew with the company and stayed there for 19 years. But that was, yeah, so that the PR, and I had a degree in journalism, which also there was a big focus on PR within my degree. But that was, it's a skill, it's something that I use every single day. I spent a lot of time talking to people and writing emails, and having these types of conversations and doing panels. So really understanding the concept of communication and public relations, if you want to call it that, has really been something that I've used as a tool, even though I don't directly use my degree. I there was a moment where I thought, okay, I do want to be a journalist, or I want to be a filmmaker, but I ended up here, and I love it, and it's yeah, I'm thankful to have that skill, to be like, I used to always, one of my former colleagues at CSAC always used to, send me email drafts of things she was about to send to people because she wanted me to tweak it or edit it. She's like, you just have you know how to communicate things succinctly and like, make it sound nice. And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess I kind of do sometimes. That degree didn't go to waste.
Well, that's good. Of course, that's what we all want, right?
I mean, yes.
So talking about your history is like, how did you get into the music industry? Because you did say that you at one point thought you wanted to be a journalist or even a filmmaker. So how did you land here?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't intentional that I would end up where I am. I
Mm.
definitely just sort of followed the signs and the path. But when I was in college, I always had various jobs, part-time jobs and internships related
Mm.
to music. I worked at the radio station, did the worked for the entertainment PR firm. All was always going to shows. I mean, I grew up, music was a big part of my life too. I studied piano.
Mm.
My dad likes to play guitar and sing, and I was a figure skater and danced. So music was definitely a part of that. So it was always in my life and sort of the center of my life. I went to a lot of shows when I was a teenager, and loved all of that. So I knew that I wanted to be in either film or music. The idea of film and music really resonated with me. I loved movies, and that was sort of why I wanted to become a filmmaker, but I also loved the marriage of music in with the images, with film. I thought that was
Mm.
always really magical to me. So that's sort of where my head was at. And then when I was graduating, and I was working for this PR firm, I started interviewing like at a lot of PR firms just because I was already at a
Mm.
PR firm.
Yeah.
I wasn't convinced, honestly, like that's what I wanted to do, but I was just trying to follow, the logical path. And then I was working, if you're familiar with South by Southwest, which is one of the, biggest music conferences, festivals. It's been going on for a long time. We were doing, the PR firm I was at, one of their clients was the Recording Academy, the Texas chapter. So I was working the South by Southwest booth for the Recording Academy, helping them out. And that's when I met my future boss at CSAC. And, it was one of those things, like he hung out with me and some of my college friends, and we dragged him around to a bunch of shows. Um, and and we had a great time. And then I stayed in touch with him. A
Mm.
few months down the road, after I had just graduated, the women that owned the PR firm, they told me that they were gonna shut it down and do their own individual things. So I was like, okay, I need to find a job. And one day I probably had a couple margaritas, and I called my future boss. His name is Trevor Gale. He's a dear friend of mine and my mentor. And I called him up, and I was like, I'm looking for a job. you know, he's like, oh, well, would you move to New York? I was like, yes, I've wanted to live in New York since was in diapers watching Sesame Street. So yeah, literally, like it was a few months later, maybe like 3 months later after I had called him, that I moved to New York. And I didn't really know, in full transparency, I really didn't know what CSAC did. I didn't fully understand it.
Yeah.
I thought, like a lot of people think, to this day, that it's a publisher or something of that nature. I did not know what a performing rights organization was or did, because I didn't work directly
Mm.
in the music space. Like I was at a
Mm.
entertainment PR firm, right? So I bought that Donald Passman book, All You Need to Know About the Music
Yeah.
Industry.
I have that
Legendary,
book.
that book.
I didn't really
Legendary.
read it. I just like
Yeah,
scanned it.
yeah.
I went straight to the PRO chapter, and
Uh-huh.
they didn't even, in the old edition, he didn't even talk about CSAC in the old edition, like the one of the
Oh.
earlier editions. I remember being very confused. I think he just mentioned it in passing or something in the book, and I was like, "Well, that doesn't tell me anything." So I didn't really understand it.
Uh-huh.
And then yeah, so that's how I entered the space. Like that was my first official job. Moved to New York, started working at CSAC, which was really a great place to land because when you're at a performing rights organization like CSAC, um, you meet everybody in the industry. You meet all walks of the industry, from the business side to the creative side. It's a beautiful thing because you work one on one with the songwriters, but you also get to meet everyone on their team, or connect them with potential members of their team, and you get to talk to record labels and publishers, because they're the A&R staffs were always like, you know, oh, well, we know you have, the early, you get people early, who's like the hot new writer that you just signed, that should be on our radar, so it was really cool it just opened up a lot of doors. And yeah, I stayed there for 19 years and grew with the company, and really just had a lot of fun, meeting, and again, took full advantage of being in that position. Really just out all the time, showed my face at everything, and just talked to everybody. I didn't I because and Trevor always used to say this to me too. I'm going to give Trevor credit. I've got to give Trevor props, because that you never know, and that is so true. Like, you just never know who you're talking to, and where they'll end up, or where their career, their path will take them. So many of those situations where wow, I never knew, but wow, look at that guy, or look at her. Like, it's cool. It's really cool.
That's amazing. That's incredible. I mean, mhm, mhm.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I said, you sort of have to build your own ecosystem, and build community, which is really, I can't stress that enough. That's how this all works. We have to have a strong community, and really take care of each other and look out for each other.
What are some changes that you'd like to see in the music industry?
I think the biggest change, that's a good question. There's so many things that could be changed, but I really think the transparency that I talked about before. I think a lot of issues really stem from, again, that lack of transparency. Whatever the shortfalls of the communication are. Um, and also just, how do we really support each other? Like, I think the industry traditionally has been very predatory. A lot of things are not artist friendly, that are built into the way our system works, and we can change all of that. It is already starting to change, because artists are definitely more aware, and they're educating themselves. And I think also, I've noticed a change in how people, are really on the business side, supporting each other, and making an effort to create community, and really support each other. I'm seeing much more of that. I don't think when I started out, I really didn't see as much of that camaraderie as I do today. It really seems like people are making a visible effort. Um, I see it, I feel it. I think especially the younger generation that's coming up are really good about collaborating, and just, sort of freestyling, and exchanging ideas, and just seeing what flows. And I think that's a beautiful
Definitely.
thing. So I think if we can just keep that energy, like, just really, how do we support each other? How do we keep it transparent and fair, and like, let's just be direct and honest, That's really, it's to me, and integrity is a big thing. Integrity, authenticity, All of those things are so important. And I think if we can stick to that and just continuing to build community and educate and help each other, then a lot of things will change for the better on their own
Definitely.
organically.
Yeah, and to your point, I think there's you had a story just like this. Like one of the some of the greatest information I ever got was from a guy that as soon as he walked away, I turned to all my friends and I said, "Why is he talking to me?" And all of them were like just, they didn't know who he was or whatever, and then he told me where he, what he was doing and where he worked, and I was like, "Why why did you just talk to me for 2 hours?" Like, and that's all, like, that's that communal aspect.
Yeah.
So it's really it is
Mm.
great. I've
You
noticed that
never
as well.
know,
Yeah.
and it may not be obvious at that
Yeah.
moment, or
Oh, it
even
wasn't.
or even 5 years from
Yeah.
now, but
Yeah.
it could be 20 years down the road, and somehow your paths cross
Yeah.
again, and there's a reason. You just never know. It's such a small world,
Yeah.
and it really is
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's not even 6 degrees of separation in this industry. It's like 2 or 3. And
Yeah.
and the longer you're in it just becomes smaller and smaller.
Yes.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think it's super important to always have that integrity, and your reputation is always going to follow you.
Mhm.
Honestly, is how I've been able to survive, is just trying to do the right thing and be a good human being, and you know
Yeah.
not be an asshole, and that's it,
Yeah,
listen to
definitely.
people, just have a mutual respect,
Yeah.
and yeah, and just try to do good business, good business, meaning like fair, equitable, transparent. I understand everybody's trying to make money and everybody's trying to win, but we can all win. We can all
Yes.
play in the sandbox together, and we can all have fun and win, and I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation, you know.
No, I don't think so. I think that's very reasonable actually. And what you've been saying is correct because even with my Instagram, like I've been seeing a lot of people who aren't necessarily involved in the industry but still saying, "Hey guys, look at this cool thing I saw and we should all really try to help that out." Or, "Hey, whoever's interested in music, like here's some internships," and they just throw out a whole list of
That's
internships.
beautiful. That's
I think that's
beautiful.
great.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's just building that community's, like, it's so important, and
Definitely.
it'll make the whole experience much more fun and enjoyable, and you won't get stressed out over corny people, or
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
just keep building the good community. That's it. Yeah.
Definitely. All right. Well, with this comes our closing. So it's been a
Thank
pleasure
you so
having you.
much. This was a lot of fun. It's very humbling and flattering to even to be your first. So thank you for that.
Of course. Thank you. Really, thank you. Because without you, our first episode wouldn't, I feel like it just wouldn't have been a great segue. I think that you have a lot of knowledge in terms of education and really, you're really trying to make people understand that it's an industry for all. And I think that's really what we want to showcase as well, especially to the, brand new aspiring community, that we really have to keep that communication and that openness really there.
Absolutely. Anything's possible. You can make it happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's do it. It's on you guys. I'm handing it over
Oh,
to
no. It's on us now. Okay. Yeah.
All right. Well, again, I'm your host, Ashley Betances, and we have our audio engineer and producer, Curtis Sullivan. Our guest is Jamie Dominguez. If you're willing to put your social
Whatever you wanna
media
plug
in the
in there,
description.
throw it all in there.
Got it. Yeah, and definitely I would suggest any of you aspiring professionals, creatives, check out the Recording Academy, Grammy U. If you're, if you're more interested in learning what I do, you can check out Sound Royalties, soundroyalties.com. All of these things, just keep educating yourselves, Definitely, the Recording Academy is a great resource. I'm on the board of governors, and there's so many resources that people aren't aware of. So try to get in there, get in that mix, and get involved, engage with that community. You'll never know who you'll meet.
Once again, please remember to like this episode and subscribe to our podcast and social media to keep up with updates. Don't forget to check out our coffee page and donate because every single donation counts. So we'll see you on the next episode, everyone.